few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I protest against the use of infinite magnitude as something completed, which is never permissible in mathematics. Infinity is merely a way of speaking. Allein die Schule des Lebens muss lehren, nur des Erreichbar zu wollen, und des Gut nicht deswegen zu verschmähen, weil noch etwas Besseres denkbar ist. We must admit with humility that, while number is purely a product of our mind, space has a reality outside of our mind, so that we cannot prescribe its laws a priori. Sophie Germain proved to the world that even a woman can accomplish something in the most rigorous and abstract of sciences, and for that reason would well have deserved an honorary degree. The history of the apple is too absurd. Whether the apple fell or not, how can anyone believe that such a discovery could in that way be accelerated or retarded? Undoubtedly, the occurrence was something of this sort. There comes to Newton a stupid, importunate man, who asks him how he hit upon his great discovery. When Newton had convinced himself what a noodle he had to do with, and wanted to get rid of the man, he told him that an apple fell on his nose, and this made the matter quite clear to the man, and he went away satisfied. As is well known, the principle of virtual velocities transforms all statics into a mathematical assignment, and by D'Alembert's principle for dynamics, the latter is again reduced to statics. Although it is very much in order that in gradual training of science, and in the instruction of the individual, the easier precedes the more difficult, the simple precedes the more complicated, the special precedes the general, yet the min, once it has arrived at the higher standpoint, demands the reverse process whereby all statics appears only as a very special case of mechanics. I confess that Fermat's theorem as an isolated proposition has very little interest for me, for a multitude of such theorems can easily be set up, which one could neither prove nor disprove. But I have been stimulated by it to bring our again several old ideas for a great extension of the theory of numbers. Of course, this theory belongs to the things where one cannot predict to what extent one will succeed in reaching obscurely hovering distant goals. A happy star must also rule, and my situation and so manifold distracting affairs, of course, do not permit me to pursue such meditations as in the happy years 1796-1798, when I created the principal topics of my disquisitions arithmeticae. But I am convinced that if good fortune should do more than I expect, and make me successful in some advances in that theory, even the Fermat theorem will appear in it only as one of the least interesting corollaries. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I protest, by seeking and blundering we learn. A person hears only what they understand. If I love you, what business is it of yours? Know thyself. If I knew myself, I'd run away. There is nothing worse than aggressive stupidity. Instruction does much, but encouragement everything. A man sees in the world what he carries in his heart. As soon as you trust yourself, you will know how to live. There is nothing more frightful than ignorance in action. Nothing shows a man's character more than what he laughs at. If you've never eaten while crying, you don't know what life tastes like. Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Life belongs to the living, and he who lives must be prepared for changes. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. Magic is believing in yourself. If you can do that, you can make anything happen. You can easily judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. Daring ideas are like chessmen moved forward. They may be beaten, but they may start a winning game. To think is easy. To act is hard. But the hardest thing in the world is to act in accordance with your thinking. We do not have to visit a madhouse to find disordered minds. Our planet is the mental institution of the universe. I have so much in me, and the feeling for her absorbs it all. I have so much, and without her it all comes to nothing. I have possessed that heart, that noble soul, in whose presence I seem to be more than I really was, because I was all that I could be. One ought every day at least to hear a little song, read a good poem, see a fine picture, and if it were possible to speak a few reasonable words. Every day one should at least hear one little song, read one good poem, see one fine painting, and if at all possible speak a few sensible words. If you treat an individual as he is, he will remain how he is. But if you treat him as if he were what he ought to be and could be, he will become what he ought to be and could be. The world is so empty if one thinks only of mountains, rivers, and cities. But to know someone who thinks and feels with us, and who, though distant, is close to us in spirit, this makes the earth for us an inhabited garden. A man should hear a little music, read a little poetry, and see a fine picture every day of his life, in order that worldly cares may not obliterate the sense of the beautiful which God has implanted in the human soul. The human race is a monotonous affair. Most people spend the greatest part of their time working in order to live, and what little freedom remains so fills them with fear that they seek out any and every means to be rid of it. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is. What goes up must come down. You have to make the rules, not follow them. I have studied these things, you have not. No great discovery was ever made without a bold guess. What we know is a drop, what we don't know is an ocean. Nature is pleased with simplicity, and nature is no dummy. Tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. Live your life as an exclamation rather than an explanation. Tact is the knack of making a point without making an enemy. Whence arises all that order and beauty we see in the world. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. Plato is my friend, Aristotle is my friend, but my greatest friend is truth. And to every action there is always an equal and opposite or contrary reaction. If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. To explain all nature is too difficult a task for any one man, or even for any one age. A man may imagine things that are false, but he can only understand things that are true. Truth is ever to be found in the simplicity, and not in the multiplicity and confusion of things. Gravity explains the motions of the planets, but it cannot explain who sets the planets in motion. He who thinks half-heartedly will not believe in God, but he who really thinks has to believe in God. To myself, I am only a child playing on the beach, while vast oceans of truth lie undiscovered before me. How came the bodies of animals to be contrived with so much art, and for what ends were their several parts? Sir Isaac Newton was asked how he discovered the law of gravity. He replied, "By thinking about it all the time." If I have ever made any valuable discoveries, it has been due more to patient attention than to any other talent. This most beautiful system of the sun, planets and comets, could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as Lord over all, and on account of his dominion he is wont to be called Lord God, Pi Alpha Nu Tau Omicron Kappa Rho Alpha Tau Omega Rho, or universal ruler. Was the eye contrived without skill in optics, and the ear without knowledge of sounds? And these things being rightly dispatched, does it not appear from phenomena that there is a being incorporeal, living, intelligent? Trials are medicines which our gracious and wise physician prescribes because we need them, and he proportions the frequency and weight of them to what the case requires. Let us trust his skill and thank him for his prescription. To explain all nature is too difficult a task for any one man, or even for any one age. 'Tis much better to do a little with certainty, and leave the rest for others that come after than to explain all things by conjecture, without making sure of anything. I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself in now, and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. God without dominion, providence, and final causes is nothing else but fate and nature, blind metaphysical necessity, which is certainly the same always and everywhere, could produce no variety of things. All that diversity of natural things which we find suited to different times and places could arise from nothing but the ideas and will of a being necessarily existing. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not want what you can do, as you cannot do what you want. Learning never exhausts the mind. The smallest feline is a masterpiece. Art is never finished, only abandoned. The knowledge of all things is possible. I love those who can smile in trouble. The deeper the feeling, the greater the pain. Nothing strengthens authority so much as silence. The noblest pleasure is the joy of understanding. The painter has the universe in his mind and hands. It is easier to resist at the beginning than at the end. Nothing can be loved or hated unless it is first understood. The greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions. I thought I was learning to live. I was only learning to die. One can have no smaller or greater mastery than mastery of oneself. As a well-spent day brings happy sleep, so life well used brings happy death. Study without desire spoils the memory, and it retains nothing that it takes in. The function of muscle is to pull and not to push, except in the case of the genitals and the tongue. Painting is poetry that is seen rather than felt, and poetry is painting that is felt rather than seen. There are three classes of people: those who see when they are shown, those who do not see. I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Being willing is not enough, we must do. A painter should begin every canvas with a wash of black, because all things in nature are dark except where exposed by the light. It had long since come to my attention that people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will always long to return. I have from an early age abjured the use of meat, and the time will come when men such as I will look upon the murder of animals as they now look upon the murder of men. Principles for the development of a complete mind. Study the science of art. Study the art of science. Develop your senses, especially learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. One has no right to love or hate anything if one has not acquired a thorough knowledge of its nature. Great love springs from great knowledge of the beloved object, and if you know it but little, you will be able to love it only a little or not at all. I love those who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. 'Tis the business of little minds to shrink, but they whose heart is firm, and whose conscience approves their conduct, will pursue their principles unto death. If you are alone, you belong entirely to yourself. If you are accompanied by even one companion, you belong only half to yourself, or even less in proportion to the thoughtlessness of his conduct. And if you have more than one companion, you will fall more deeply into the same plight. You will never have a greater or lesser dominion than that over yourself. The height of a man's success is gauged by his self-mastery, the depth of his failure by his self-abandonment. And this law is the expression of eternal justice. He who cannot establish dominion over himself will have no dominion over others. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge. Doubt thou the stars are fire. Doubt that the sun doth move. Doubt truth to be a liar. But never doubt I love. If music be the food of love, play on. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. My only love sprung from my only hate. You speak an infinite deal of nothing. Lord, what fools these mortals be! These violent delights have violent ends. Though she be but little, she is fierce. This above all, to thine own self be true. To be or not to be, that is the question. Hell is empty, and all the devils are here. We know what we are, but not what we may be. Don't waste your love on somebody who doesn't value it. I like this place, and could willingly waste my time in it. It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Words are easy like the wind, faithful friends are hard to find. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Cowards die many times before their deaths, but the valiant taste death but once. The course of true love never did run smooth, but either it was different in blood. My tongue will tell the anger of my heart, or else my heart concealing it will break. Be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them. Love looks not with the eyes but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. Nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste, wings and no eyes figure unheedy haste, and therefore is love said to be a child, because in choice he is so oft beguiled. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is love comes into being through useful service to others. The inner self is as distinct from the outer self as heaven is from earth. Such as the love is, such is the wisdom, consequently such is the man. And 368. People are unaware that spirits even exist, let alone that angels are present with them. Man, before he is being regenerated, does not even know that any internal man exists, much. This I can declare, things that are in heaven are more real than things that are in the world. Love consists in desiring to give what is our own to another, and feeling his delight as our own. We do need to realize, though, that it is the quality of our love that determines the quality of this life. Peace has in it trust in the Lord, that he governs all things, provides all things, and leads to a good end. The nature of heaven is to provide a place there for all who lead good lives, no matter what their religion may be. A spiritual church first becomes a church when it acts as bidden by charity, charity being the true teaching of faith. For every man's soul is in a spiritual body after it has cast off the material coverings which it carried about in the world. Anyone can see that intending and not acting when weakened is not really intending, and loving and not doing good when weakened is not really loving. Everything good or true that the angels inspire in us is God's, so God is constantly talking to us. He talks very differently, though, to one person than to another. For heaven is within us, and people who have heaven within them come into heaven. The heaven within us is our acknowledgement of the divine and our being led by the divine. The spiritual idea of distances of space is the same as of distances of good or distances of truth. which are affinities and likenesses according to states of goodness and truth. All the ancient churches were churches representative of spiritual things, the rites, and also the statutes, according to which their worship was established, consisted of pure correspondence. In the spiritual body, moreover, man appears such as he is with respect to love and faith, for everyone in the spiritual world is the effigy of his own love, not only as to the face and the body, but also as to the speech and the actions. Kindness is an inner desire that makes us want to do good things even if we do not get anything in return. It is the joy of our life to do them. When we do good things from this inner desire, there is kindness in everything we think, say, want, and do. What could be sweeter to us than to hear and persuade ourselves that we can be saved, even if we live like a savage beast? Even non-Christians see that this is false, and many of them shudder at Christian teachings when they observe how Christians live. Others work among the spirits that have just arrived in the world of spirits. Again, others raise the children who have died in infancy. Swedenborg ensures the parents of these infants that all children, whether born within or outside of the church, are adopted by the Lord and become angels. It is amazing but true that it is easy for any of us to rebuke someone else who is intending to do something evil and say, "Don't do that, that's a sin." And yet it is difficult for us to say the same thing to ourselves. The reason is that saying it to ourselves requires a movement of the will, but saying it to someone else requires only a low level of thought based on things we have heard. People who have intended and loved what is evil in the world intend and love what is evil in the other life, and then they no longer allow themselves to be led away from it. This is why people who are absorbed in evil are connected to hell and actually are there in spirit. And after death, they crave above all to be where their evil is. So after death, it is we, not the Lord, who cast ourselves into hell. Man, when he is reborn, passes through the ages as he who is born, and the preceding state is always as an egg in respect to the subsequent one. Thus he is continually conceived and born, and this not only when he lives in the world, but also when he comes into another life to eternity, and still when he cannot be further perfected, then to be as an egg to those things which remain to be manifested, which are indefinite. A life of faith without love is like sunlight without warmth, the type of light that occurs in winter, when nothing grows and everything droops and dies. Faith rising out of love, on the contrary, is like light from the sun in spring, when everything grows and flourishes. Warmth from the sun is the fertile agent. The same is true in spiritual and heavenly affairs, which are typically represented in the Word by objects found in nature and human culture. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. When I was a boy, I thought myself a man. Now that I am a man, I find myself a boy. The experiments I am about to relate may be repeated with great ease, whenever the sun shines, and without any other apparatus than is at hand to everyone. The nature of light is a subject of no material importance to the concerns of life or to the practice of the arts, but it is in many other respects extremely interesting. It must be observed that fishing with any living bait is to be condemned for the same reason as fishing with a worm. In all such instances, we torture two animals at once for our amusement. Proposition VIII. When two undulations from different origins coincide either perfectly or very nearly in direction, their joint effect is a combination of the motions belonging to each. Bacon first taught the world the true method of the study of nature, and rescued science from that barbarism in which the followers of Aristotle, by a too servile imitation of their master. You may evade justice, but in our eyes you are each guilty of egregious war crimes, of plunder and, finally, of murder, including the murder of thousands of young Americans, my fellow veterans whose future you stole. Newton advanced, with one gigantic stride, from the regions of twilight into the noonday of science. A Boyle and a Hooke, who would otherwise have been deservedly the boast of their century, served but as obscure forerunners of Newton's glories. But it will be found that one universal law prevails in all these phenomena. Where two portions of the same light arrive in the eye by different routes, either exactly or very nearly in the same direction, the appearance or disappearance of various colors is determined by the greater or less difference in the lengths of the paths. Suppose a number of equal waves of water to move upon the surface of a stagnant lake with a certain constant velocity and to enter a narrow channel leading out of the lake. Suppose, then, another similar cause to have excited another equal series of waves, which arrive at the same time with the first. Neither series of waves will destroy the other, but their effects will be combined. If we seek for the simplest arrangement, which would enable the eye to receive and discriminate the impressions of the different parts of the spectrum, we may suppose three distinct sensations only to be excited by the rays of the three principal pure colors, falling on any given point of the retina, the red, the green, and the violet. While the rays occupying the intermediate spaces are capable of producing mixed sensations, the yellow those which belong to the red and green, and the blue those which belong to the green and violet. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only three epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. Thoroughly conscious ignorance is the prelude to every real advance in science. I have the capacity of being more wicked than any example that man could set me. Faraday is, and must always remain, the father of that enlarged science of electromagnetism. I have looked into most philosophical systems, and I have seen that none will work without God. All the mathematical sciences are founded on relations between physical laws and laws of numbers. The true logic for this world is the calculus of probabilities, which takes account of the magnitude of the probability. Mathematicians may flatter themselves that they possess new ideas which mere human language is, as yet, unable to express. The only laws of matter are those that our minds must fabricate, and the only laws of mind are fabricated for it by matter. I have also a paper afloat with an electromagnetic theory of light, which, till I am convinced to the contrary, I hold to be great guns. It is a universal condition of the enjoyable that the mind must believe in the existence of a law, and yet have a mystery to move about in. In every branch of knowledge, the progress is proportional to the amount of facts on which to build, and therefore to the facility of obtaining data. The chief philosophical value of physics is that it gives the mind something distinct to lay hold of, which, if you don't, nature at once tells you you are wrong. It is of great advantage to the student of any subject to read the original memoirs on that subject, for science is always most completely assimilated when it is in the nascent state. The second law of thermodynamics has the same degree of truth as the statement that if you throw a tumblerful of water into the sea, you cannot get the same tumblerful of water out again. In science, it is when we take some interest in the great discoverers and their lives that it becomes endurable, and only when we begin to trace the development of ideas that it becomes fascinating. The student who uses home-made apparatus, which is always going wrong, often learns more than one who has the use of carefully adjusted instruments, to which he is apt to trust and which he dares not take to pieces. Science is incompetent to reason upon the creation of matter itself out of nothing. We have reached the utmost limit of our thinking faculties when we have admitted that, because matter cannot be eternal and self-existent, it must have been created. In speaking of the energy of the field, however, I wish to be understood literally. All energy is the same as mechanical energy, whether it exists in the form of motion or in that of elasticity, or in any other form. The energy in electromagnetic phenomena is mechanical energy. What then is light according to the electromagnetic theory? It consists of alternate and opposite rapidly recurring transverse magnetic disturbances, accompanied with electric displacements, the direction of the electric displacement being at the right angles to the magnetic disturbance, and both at right angles to the direction of the ray. It was a great step in science when men became convinced that, in order to understand the nature of things, they must begin by asking, not whether a thing is good or bad, noxious or beneficial, but of what kind it is, and how much is there of it. Quality and quantity were then first recognized as the primary features to be observed in scientific inquiry. I think men of science as well as other men need to learn from Christ, and I think Christians whose minds are scientific are bound to study science, that their view of the glory of God may be as extensive as their being is capable. But I think that the results which each man arrives at in his attempts to harmonize his science with his Christianity ought not to be regarded as having any significance except to the man himself, and to him only for a time, and should not receive the stamp of a society. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. When a philosopher says something that is true, then it is trivial. When he says something that is not trivial, then it is false. It is not knowledge, but the act of learning, not the possession of, but the act of getting there, which grants the greatest enjoyment. I rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out. The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line, joining the middle points of opposite sides. Two magnitudes, whether commensurable or incommensurable, balance at distances reciprocally proportional to the magnitudes. The diameter of the Earth is greater than the diameter of the Moon, and the diameter of the Sun is greater than the diameter of the Earth. Those who claim to discover everything, but produce no proofs of the same, may be confuted, as having actually pretended to discover the impossible. Any solid lighter than a fluid will, if placed in the fluid, be so far immersed that the weight of the solid will be equal to the weight of the fluid displaced. Equal weights at equal distances are in equilibrium, and equal weights at unequal distances are not in equilibrium, but incline towards the weight which is at the greater distance. It follows at once from the last proposition that the center of gravity of any triangle is at the intersection of the lines drawn from any two angles to the middle points of the opposite. Supposed to have been his cry, jumping naked from his bath and running in the streets, excited by a discovery about water displacement to solve a problem about the purity of a gold crown. Having been the discoverer of many splendid things, he is said to have asked his friends and relations that, after his death, they should place on his tomb a cylinder enclosing a sphere, writing on it the proportion of the containing solid to that which is contained. I am persuaded that this method for calculating the volume of a sphere will be of no little service to mathematics, for I foresee that once it is understood and established, it will be used to discover other theorems which have not yet occurred to me by other mathematicians, now living or yet unborn. Many people believe that the grains of sand are infinite in multitude. Others think that, although their number is not without limit, no number can ever be named which will be greater than the number of grains of sand. But I shall try to prove to you that among the numbers which I have named there are those which exceed the number of grains in a heap of sand, the size not only of the earth, but even of the universe. Archimedes to Eratosthenes' greeting. Certain things first became clear to me by a mechanical method, although they had to be demonstrated by geometry afterwards, because their investigation by the said method did not furnish an actual demonstration. But it is of course easier, when we have previously acquired by the method some knowledge of the questions, to supply the proof than it is to find it without any previous knowledge. Spoken of the young Archimedes. He was as much enchanted by the rudiments of algebra as he would have been if I had given him an engine worked by steam, with a methylated spirit lamp to heat the boiler. More enchanted, perhaps, for the engine would have got broken, and remaining always itself, would in any case have lost its charm, while the rudiments of algebra continued to grow and blossom in his mind with an unfailing luxuriance. Every day he made the discovery of something which seemed to him exquisitely beautiful. The new toy was inexhaustible in its potentialities. Few but pure. Pauca est matura, few but ripe. The queen of science is mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of the sciences. It is demanded for proof that every doubt becomes impossible. Thou nature art my goddess, to thy laws my services are bound. Life stands before me like an eternal spring with new and brilliant clothes. I have had my results for a long time, but I do not yet know how I am to arrive at them. I believe you are more believing in the Bible than I am not. You are happier than I. There have been only 3 epoch-making mathematicians, Archimedes, Newton, and Eisenstein. You say that faith is a gift. This is perhaps the most correct thing that can be said about it. It is commonly believed that anyone who tabulates numbers is a statistician. This is like believing that anyone who owns a scalpel is a surgeon. By the help of microscopes, there is nothing so small as to escape our inquiry. Hence there is a new visible world discovered to the understanding. Nature is, as it were, a continual circulation. Water is raised in vapor into the air by one quality and precipitated down in drops by another. The rivers run into the sea, and the sea again supplies them. The footsteps of nature are to be tracked, not only in her ordinary course, but when she seems to be put to her shifts, to make many doublings and turnings, and to use some kind of art in endeavoring to avoid our discovery. The truth is, the science of nature has been already too long made only a work of the brain and the fancy. It is now high time that it should return to the plainness and soundness of observations on material and obvious things. The business and design of the Royal Society is to improve the knowledge of natural things and all useful arts, manufactures, mechanic practices, engines, and inventions by experiments, not meddling with divinity, metaphysics, morals, politics, grammar, rhetoric, or logic. There is scarce any one invention which this nation has produced in our age, but it has some way or other been set forward by his assistants. He is indeed a man born for the good of mankind, and for the honor of his country. So I may thank God that Dr. Wilkins was an Englishman, for wherever he had lived, there had been the chief seat of generous knowledge and true philosophy. Most of these mountains and inland places whereon these kind of petrified bodies and shells are found at present, or have been heretofore, were formerly under the water, and that either by the descending of the waters to another part of the earth by the alteration of the center of gravity of the whole bulk, or rather by the eruption of some kind of subterraneous fires or earthquakes, great quantities of earth have been deserted by the water and laid bare and dry. For the members of the assembly having before their eyes so many fatal instances of the errors and falsehoods, in which the greatest part of mankind has so long wandered, because they relied upon the strength of humane reason alone, have begun anew to correct all hypotheses by sense, as seamen do their dead reckonings by celestial observations. And to this purpose it has been their principal endeavor to enlarge and strengthen the senses by medicine, and by such outward instruments as are proper for their particular works. If the finding of coins, medals, urns, and other monuments of famous persons, or towns, or utensils, be admitted for unquestionable proofs that such persons or things have in former times had a being, certainly those petrifactions may be allowed to be of equal validity and evidence that there have been formerly such vegetables or animals. These are truly authentic antiquity, not to be counterfeited, the stamps and impressions and characters of nature that are beyond the reach and power of humane wit and invention, and are true universal characters legible to all rational men.